Shabbat Shalom PJC. Shabbat Parshat Korach presents wonderful challenges. It's a difficult parsha because we are so fundamentally loyal to Moshe and Aaron. We see the Torah through their perspective, through their eyes, and any challenge to Moshe and Aaron, any challenge that smacks of insurrection, that smacks of a lack of respect, is very difficult for us to approach, very difficult for us to think about critically. That being said, along comes the Ishbitzer Rebbe, who says, Korach was right. If you think about the events since Yetzias Mitzrayim, if you think about everything that's happened to the Jewish people, the amount of death and destruction, the amount of failure that has defined the Jewish people since they left Egypt, you begin to wonder, is Moshe and Aaron's leadership an effective one? Are the structures of leadership put into place, designed by Moshe and Aaron, the right structures for the people? The Ishbitzer Rebbe suggests that Korach's claim might have had some validity. We can explore that, and we might explore that more over Shabbat. What I want to take a few moments to consider is not Korach's claim, but Korach's punishment. We know famously, almost romantically at this point, the earth opens up and swallows up the entire congregation, and it's this dramatic and awe-inspiring moment. God, the Mishnah in Pirkei Avos tells us, God creates the mouth to the earth, anticipating this tremendous miracle. He creates the mouth to the earth during twilight in the last moments of creation, anticipating it would be needed generations, thousands of years later. What is that punishment? We see it nowhere else in the Torah. We see it nowhere else in history. In fact, it's not a punishment that's even pronounced so dramatically. Moshe gets there and says, if this congregation is incorrect, if this congregation's claim has no validity, then let them not die a normal death. Let them not live all their years, but let the mouth of the earth open up and swallow them, consume them. What is this punishment? To understand it, I think we need to look a little bit more deeply at Korach. Who was Korach, and what is his backstory? What is the prologue to the Korach story? You can't look at Korach in a vacuum. You have to look at him, where he comes from, what his family story is, what his background is. Let's keep in mind when the Mishkan was being constructed, each family from the tribe of Levi had a different purpose. Korach ben Yitzhar ben Kahas, right? Korach, the child of Yitzhar, the grandson of Kahas, was from the family of Kahatites. And what did the family of Kahas do? They were the ones who carried the most sanctified utensils of the Mishkan. The Torah tells us that there was massive amounts of vulnerability in carrying the Klei HaMikdash, in carrying the vessels of the Mikdash. Because if you were to carry it in the wrong way, if you were to be exposed to the Kalim itself, if you were to touch it, if you were to have, frankly, even a lack of faith while you were carrying the Kalim, you would die. It was a highly vulnerable, a highly dangerous occupation for the family of Kahas to undertake. So much so that the Torah tells us that Aaron and his Kohanim, his sons, had to tightly cover all of the Kalim, all of the vessels, before the family of Kahas could move in to pick them up. Family of Kahas had no direct exposure to the Kalim. Rather, they moved in and they carried, those blue tarps that moving companies use to protect the items they're moving. So Kahas was the moving company. Yet they didn't get to cover the items. It was the Kohanim that covered the items. And it was Kahas that did just the moving. And so Korach is experiencing this schlepping. He's experiencing the carrying, and he understands that he has limitations. Right? This is not someone who has, this is not someone who has a position that he desires. All he experiences is he's not permitted to have access to the kalim. He's not permitted even to be the one that covers the kalim. His job is just to carry the already kalim. And what does he say? Kulam kadoshim. All of the people of Hashem are holy. Why do they get the job? Why do the Kohanim have the job of covering the Mishkan? We are all holy. To a certain degree, Korach is saying, why do we need kalim in the Mishkan to start off with? Am I not a good enough kli? Does God not reside within me, within us? What's the point in having these external kalim? What's the point in us carrying them? You see, Levi's entire perspective, his claim was not false. Korach's claim had value, it had merit. Trying to understand the role of a mikdash, trying to understand the role of kalim, trying to understand the hierarchy of Jewish leadership and the purpose and role of each of us within Judaism is a worthwhile and an important conversation. But how do you enter that conversation? From what perspective? Not from the perspective of what we cannot perform. Not from the perspective of the restrictions that the Torah places upon us, but from the perspective of what we can do. Had Korach entered the conversation and says, look, my job is to carry the kalim. I am so privileged to do so. Let me understand the restrictions around it. Let me understand the momentous responsibility of carrying these kalim and why that's my responsibility and not anything else. Instead, he walks in and he says, we're all holy. Instead, he walks in and he says, why are we not? We're kalim of God. We are vessels of God. God dwells within us. His claim of being a kli to Hashem, of being that vessel for sanctity, the response of God is directly in reference to that. How is it directly in reference to that? Because remember, God says a keli needs to be covered before it's transported. The language that God uses, if you look it up in Bamidbar, the language God uses to describe covering the kalim of the Mishkan is vativala. The kalim need to be swallowed up. Korach, you're claiming that you're so holy. You're looking at everything you don't have. You're looking at everything you can't have. I'm going to show you what it means to be a klei hamishkan. I'm going to show you what it means to be so holy that you cannot exist in this world. You cannot just live out in the open. There's too much risk in being that level of holiness. And so what does God say? God says to the Jewish people, move back, move away from this mishkan. If you look in the Parsha, the words that the Torah uses to describe the encampment of Korach and his community is a mishkan. Because that's the claim of Korach. And what does Hashem say? A mishkan. Kalim are too holy to be left out in the open. Let me v'tivala. Let me swallow you up. The ultimate point, though there may be validities to Korach's claim, the ultimate issue with Korach is that he defines himself by what he doesn't have, by rather than the blessings and the privilege that he does have. He looks, right? You asked any other of the tribes of Israel, was Korach special? Was the Levites special? They would have said, whoa, they're carrying the kalim. Look how special they are. You asked Korach, all he saw was the burden that he was carrying and the opportunities he did not have. When we define our spiritual selves, we so often define our spiritual selves by looking at others and saying, they have so much. They have so many opportunities. Even at times, we look at others and that narrative that we say about ourselves is, I can never be that. And that's a Korach approach. And God says, okay, I will match your claim with how I treat you. The message is we are so blessed to have so many tools, to have so many opportunities to engage and to connect with the divine. We have to take the opportunities that are presented to us while understanding that there is differentiation within the community. There is different roles and different purposes to different people. And we should look to the opportunities that are designed for us and try to think how to best celebrate them, how to best understand them, and how to best grow through those opportunities. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom as we continue to build our community, to start the physical growth of our next spiritual home. I hope we will continue to look at ourselves and say, how fortunate are we to have the Torah, to have each other, to have a sense of purpose and mission for why we exist, to carry the Kalim of Hashem, to carry the message of God into this world. Wishing everyone a Shabbat Shalom.